Hi, David Odell with Odell Complete Concrete. This is a job we're going to be doing, a poured in place concrete wall. It's going to be 6 inches wide and 5 feet high. Right now I'm going to start building the panel, and what we just started with 4 sheets of plywood for this project. These are 8x4, so this is giving me my 5-foot height. And 5 foot is off of the existing concrete walkway and driveway. And this plywood that I'm using here is a 3/4 inch thick, and it's specifically designed for concrete. I got all the supplies for this job at Whitecap in Santa Ana. I'm going to be using some snap ties as well to hold this wall together so it doesn't blow apart when we put concrete in it. Also, we had an interesting notch at the bottom because of what we're doing. We're setting it right onto the edge of existing concrete, and then the concrete disappears, and then we're going to drop it down, and that's why that notch out's in there. That way we can get the concrete before we hit footing. The footing spread will be 4 inches below grade. That's why that notch is in the bottom of that plywood. Now here's your bottom plate, which will support the bottom of the plywood from blowing out. It'll also stop it from lifting, which isn't very common. I'm just using some 5/16 tap cons here. And I reuse those over and over. I've probably had the same tap cons for over 5 years. Now if you see those 2x4s on the edge, those actually run past the 5 foot wide, the width. I actually overcut the width 3.5 to allow to put those 2x4s on the end, because those 2x4s are going to hold the ends of the walls from blowing out. Now since we've got one side up, I'm going to go ahead and put the chamfer on the inside corners and the top edge. This is the easy time to do it because you can't really do it if you have both walls up. You can't nail that inside corner chamfer, so you got to put it up as you go. Also, we'll be putting the rebar in before we put the second side of this wall on there. So there's your chamfer all set. I just got to do a little fill in there in the middle. And I just ran it down. That's 3/4 inch chamfer, just ripped at a 45 basically. So this plywood's really smooth. It has a really smooth side to it, so that's the side we're going to be using on the inside. So when we strip this, it'll be real smooth. You won't see a lot of grain or indentations of bad plywood. Here's a little kicker I threw on there just to keep it plumb. And that's all you're going to really need, because the weight, when the concrete goes in here, these also could be known as turnbuckles, but this is a lot less expensive. If you don't have turnbuckles, you just throw a couple of kickers on it. There's not a lot of weight on it pushing, side. It's not going to want to lean on you. It's just going to want to spread apart. That was the bottom of the footing. We're going to drop some horizontal. We're going to use all 1/2 inch steel in here. Now we'll start building the second side of this wall. Also, there's going to be a column, because what we're doing is we're creating a new entrance to the front yard from the driveway. Then there'll be a gate in between the column and the new wall. The column will also be poured in place concrete, and that's a 12 inch wide column, but it's actually going to be taller than the 5 feet because we're at the lower side of the driveway, so it's actually going to be about 5 feet 8 inches high on the column. That way we maintain level across the between the column and the wall. Now here's the rebar going up. Now this is the time you want to do it. You can't really tie those in there when both panels are up. So you get that up. Suspend it up there any way you want. I just wrapped some tie wire over the top and hung it. Now what we have here, we just stood the wall up, the outside, and then you see all these horizontal 2x4s on the outside of these panels. Well, those are exactly the same level as the other side. I just duplicated it. That way when I drill through, as you've seen there, I could put snap ties and run them on through. And it's just a metal rod that has some buckles on them that hold it from spreading apart. Now I can pull the panel down, slide. So you have to put those snap ties in before the second panel, because they have a little cone, plastic cone on the inside that maintains that 6-inch spread. So you can tighten these up really tight, and you'll see the clamps going on, and there they are right there. You can tighten them up as much as you want, and it's not going to get smaller than 6 inches because of the cones on the inside. They have these snap ties you can get in any size, 6, 8, 12. Depends on what width wall you want. But the interesting thing about a poured in place wall is that you would think typically the width would determine the pressure load against the plywood, but it's really the height that actually determines the pressure. The width has nothing to do with it. So there it is. See, there's the ends just kind of wrapped around, nails on both sides, so the end can't blow out. Also supports the two large walls from blowing out. And we didn't typically run these at 16-inch center, but I found you can get away with, if you go with 1-inch plywood, you could go 24-inch on center and she'll hold. But in this case here, we got 3/4-inch plywood, and I just kind of spread it out evenly, because the reason I spread it out evenly, because these cones, after I strip, will show a hole in the wall that can be patched. But in this case, we wanted to leave them exposed, so I spaced all the snap ties evenly, so it's going to look decent when we strip, to leave the holes exposed. This particular job, he wants some air bubbles in. He doesn't really want the rock pockets you could get without vibrating the concrete into the wall. So we're not going to vibrate this particular wall. All we're going to do is tap it lightly with a hammer when we put the concrete in there, because that way we can leave some air bubbles and give it more of a rustic type look, because that's what he wants. That's what the homeowner is going for here. So that's what we're going to do. Now if you really want it smooth as glass without having to strip and face and trowel, you could drop a vibrator in there. And the thing about a vibrator, when you use a vibrator, there's right ways and wrong ways to use a vibrator on a wall. The right way is to just jab it quickly, drop it in, and pull it out as fast as you go down, as fast as you can come up. You don't want to leave it setting in there, because then you're actually weakening the concrete. So quick jabs with the vibrator if you're going to use one. You can rent them also. Now what we're doing here is we're going to go ahead and build the column. And I'm using the same system as I used on the ends of that other wall, overlapping and then putting some 2x4s on the outside. Now all these panels, especially if they're full sheets, you could just continually reuse them if you had a flat level surface at the bottom. In this case, nothing was level at the bottom, so everything was custom cut and fit to fit the tapered, the angled sloped concrete that was existing, the notch outs for the drop down. So this plywood is pretty much waste at this point. If you had a large wall, you could keep pulling panels and moving them on down. Like if you were to pour your footings first or your entire slab first, you could just start stacking them and rolling. Real simple. I came up a little short on my chamfer. I was almost short. I had to scavenge around all over the job site, and I ended up having enough pieces. There we are on pour day. We actually poured a couple things here. I poured the driveway extension, which was in the previous video, and now we're off the same load. We're going to pour the wall on that driveway extension that you've already seen probably. That was in the previous video. Now here we are. I did add some fiber mesh into this load because we've got flat work as well as the wall going up. First thing we'll do is we're going to hit these footings and seal them off. We're at a 4-inch slump here. You can see it's stacking up really nicely. Not only that, but I think I've got like a 4,000 psi here, so I wanted to go something pretty rich so it would stack like this. So we sealed the bottom off nice and tight up against the bottom of that form. That way I'll drag this hose over the driveway, pour that out. When I come back over here in 20 minutes, I can top off without all the concrete pushing out the bottom. Here's the concrete going into the form. There's those cones. You can get a good look at them right now, how that holds that 6-inch space there. And what that chamfer does, it just softens the corners basically, so you don't have a square corner. Now rather than building a cage on this outside, I ended up just stabbing them from the top. So it was really quite simple this way. But normally you could get some number 3 rings, 6-inch squares, and then wrap your 4 bars and hang it and all that. But this is going to work just fine. There's the kicker. I got 2 kickers on the column, 1 each direction. Then I tied it over to the wall as well. Well, this is finished product right here. That's all there is to it for a wall. There's really no finishing involved. It's all form work. And I did use screws on everything. You could use nails though. Nails work fine for this kind of stuff. $16 duplex on all your 2x4s, and then 6 pennies or 8s for your plywood to your 2x4s. This is actually, we waited about 7 days to strip this, and the reason I waited so long is because I wanted it to cure out nice and slow, and that plywood holds that moisture in. Also, I wanted those snap ties to get good and locked into the wall, because the way those snap ties break off is you have to bend them over at a 90 and then turn them either direction, counter or clockwise, and then they snap off inside the wall. But if that concrete's green, they're going to spin in the wall and they're not going to snap off properly. So there it is. That's just a hammer tap. Now you can imagine if you dropped a vibrator in there what you'd end up with. You wouldn't see any of those air bubbles whatsoever. Right there on the bottom of that column, there's a little bit of spread on underneath that plate. Very little. I just ground it off. No biggie. Now we're getting the panel off. It just pulls right off of those snap ties. So there it is. Now we just got to break those off. See the edge there? A little bit of, we'll just grind that smooth. A little touch up around there on the chamfer edge. And then we've got our footing well below grade, so I can pour, because we've got another pour coming up here for the entrance. And the footing's well below, so the new slab will go right over the top of it. And what I did is I had a 1/2 inch piece of galvanized pipe. It can be galvanized steel, black, iron, whatever. But I slide those over the here's a good demonstration of it. You slide the pipe over, spin it, and it snaps. And usually the cone comes out with it at the same time. Then you just got that little hollow there. It can be normally that would be patched in, and then you would sack the entire wall, and it could be as smooth as silk. But in this case, we're going to leave it raw, uncut, and just concrete. Anyway, thank you for watching the video. If you like these kind of videos, make sure you subscribe, like, and hit the bell so that way you can get notified when I upload. Have a good day.